way of Will John.
What's up, people? We are back again with some of my favorite humans. And today we're going to cover a whole lot of stuff, which most of you guys may or may not, I guess, have an idea about. But at the end of this, you will be more knowledgeable and you'll be a better person for having listened. So we have with us today Billy Carson and Matt LaCroix. So thanks to both of you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honor to talk to you two gentlemen.
So we delved into a whole lot in our separate talks. They share some similarities. Obviously, we talked about consciousness, ancient history, and stuff like that. You guys are well known in your fields for being experts in this, and it's an interesting field. Where we came from, why humans do the things that they do, what was really going on. The differences between what's told as mainstream, the story of our mainstream history, and what's being called as technically alternative history, which is a funny way to say it, because in reality, it's a story that's unfolding all the time. So I know you guys are working on a collaborative effort. So maybe if whichever one of you guys feels adept at kicking it off with letting us know what you guys are writing about, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. Well,
Billy, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, Matt has been really spearheading this whole thing. He even came up with the name for the book. And I'm actually a little bit behind him on my parts because I've been too busy running around doing all this other stuff and now just trying to catch up to where he's been because he's super efficient. He's been doing phenomenal. So I'll let Matt kick it off and then I'll fill in the blanks.
So this whole thing got started about a year ago. Billy Carson came to visit me up in Portland, Maine, when I lived there. Of course, now I live in Colorado. And we had a great day just talking about ideas for projects. We actually didn't even really know that was going to happen, but through that mastermind conversation, collaborative talk, we really came to the idea of, hey, let's really do something together that we can reach a much larger audience, but also have our combined ideas and interests to a book that is something that has never been done before. We're attempting to create or recreate, I should say, the story of humanity, our story, how far back it goes, not Neanderthals and human Homo sapiens living in caves and knocking on sticks and rocks. What we're talking about here is when civilization began, when Homo sapiens all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere, and we find the lowering of astronomy and astrology and mathematics and agriculture and animal husbandry and basically all the things that created civilization all emerged at once, all in a single time period in history. And so what we're trying to do is cover everything from the early Sumerian lineages of Mesopotamia through Atlantis and Lemuria, and talking all the way about the cataclysms of the Younger Dryas and how consciousness changed and how we fell from being a spiritual connected being of the cosmos to this materialistic, largely left brain controlled being that seems to be almost a shell of what its true self is. And we're going to try to recreate and at the same time preserve more ancient writings in any book in history. So this is going to even have more than my previous book, The Stage of Time. We are going all the way from tablets to Mayan readings to pyramid text, everything in between. So I'm really excited about where this is going and the direction it's going. And I know it's taking a little longer than some have hoped, but I like to think that truly great things take time. Right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is in divine time. And it's going to be a remarkable book. I'm feeling it now that I'm getting deep into it. There's so many texts out there that people don't even know, exist. And as I was going back into doing my research, just for the writing of the book, I started coming across tablets that I had heard about, some that I had read so many years ago, some that I hadn't even known existed. Different versions of tablets as they were recopied over many thousands of years. Talking about Sumerian tablets, papyruses from pre-dynastic Egypt. There's so much content that's available out there. So I'm really looking forward to helping to paint this picture, this timeline, so to speak, of the beginning until where we are right now. And also, we're going to try to create a specific type of a timeline piece that will be available in the book, but for a full size, which would probably be, 7-8 feet long. It'll be, somebody can probably order that separately to get the full layout of the timeline of humanity. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those fans that's waiting. That's been there. I know you guys haven't put out a tape, but yeah, we're definitely ready. But however long it takes, like you said, greatness takes time, and there's so much within that I think is important for people. And like I mentioned, I think in both of our podcasts previously, a lot of the things that we try to do here is pull young guys generally into trying to figure out how they can use the information, the knowledge, and things, and why is this important? Because you guys are two men who have dedicated an enormous amount of time between traveling and books and reading ancient texts, and Matt's learning how to write Sumerian, and it's a phenomenal effort, right? You guys have to dedicate. It's no joke. And so the question has to be, once you get past your teen years, is why are you doing the things that you're doing, and what you hope to learn, from that. And so I kind of wanted to kick also portions of this off, and you guys can fill in the blanks here. But with the current events and things going on right now, consciousness and Afghanistan, and just the collective consciousness. I was having a discussion with somebody who was asking me if the law, let's say the secret, in a certain sense, this as you are within, so without, does that really truly represent mankind, and does that truly represent what's going on, say, in Afghanistan? Are we to say that the consciousness at that certain place and within those people is causing that? It's a hard thing for someone to truly grasp, and so I'm curious if your guys' texts and knowledge, what does it speak about the relationship between consciousness, mankind, and do we have an effect on this world around us in that sense? Are we creating these things, and what that says?
Well, I tend to think that we are creating it collectively. I think collective consciousness creates reality, even though we have a certain amount of control over our own reality tunnels. So there's a tunnel that we ourselves can control to a certain point, to a certain extent. And so within that tunnel, we have the hermetic principle of cause and effect, which, goes and is actually going to be talked about in some of my parts of the book. And so we're talking about decisions that you make, and every decision you make will have a consequence. Whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, that decision will have a consequence. And so when you're in this reality tunnel that you have access to, you're basically able to create ripples in space-time that will alter your own future reality in the third dimension, based off of conscious intent, conscious thought, and energy that you put behind those thoughts and intents. And so that ripple goes out and takes things that are in what we call in physics superposition, multiple realities that can occur, and it kind of slams and isolates one particular reality and brings that into the tunnel where you are, and you are on a trajectory or a collision course directly with that, based off of decisions you could have made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 minutes ago, 100 years ago, 1 second ago. It varies as we are living in this moment by moment, third dimensional reality. And so collectively, though, as a global planet, we are all helping to create and manifest reality on this planet based off of what's going on in us, our internal thought, our consciousness, our ideologies, our belief systems, and all of that. And also the amount of fear that we're operating under, the PTSD that we're operating under, the depression that we're operating, all that comes into play with a global connective consciousness, just like the internet. And so you'll see the turmoil manifesting on particular parts of the planet based off of what's happening in the manifestation of the complete consciousness of the planet. It can isolate in different areas, but it doesn't mean particularly those people in those areas caused that trauma. It can be coming from all the collective consciousness. As if you're living in a house, and your house, for example, your office desk is all messy and it's trash, and your house is trash and everything else is filthy, that's showing that inside of you filled up with so much trauma and chaos that there's nothing left on the inside, and it spills over to your outside world. And so when you see these things going on, like in Afghanistan and what's going on in South Africa and all these other places, we're looking at the spilling up, the fullness of human consciousness globally, and the spilling over is what's happening on the outside. What starts on the inside then eventually makes it to the outside. It's not the opposite way around. And so it shows us that we still have a lot more work to do. We still have to really tap into the global consciousness. We have to continue to wake people up, raise them up, and we have to continue to teach them about the ancient past, because all these things that are going on now are not new. This is ancient stuff that's been going on for millennia in cycles. And so we have to get people to see into the distant past so we know, because the past is prologue. And if the past is prologue, if we can go back and access these horrors and these detriments and these tortures and everything else that's gone on, and these bad political systems and everything else, and we can isolate them and figure out, where did we go wrong? How can we now see this, understand it, and then correct ourselves so that we can have a better future? I think that's really what we're trying to do, myself and Matt. We're trying to create a better future by tapping into this ancient past and giving people a real idea of what really happened. How can we clean up our consciousness? How can we reprogram ourselves? How can we open up ourselves to understand that change is needed and how to create that change based off of what happened in the ancient past? So that's my take on it. I don't know, Matt may have a slightly different one, but that's what I see.
Yes. Will, can I add a little bit of a layer to that?
For sure.
So that was very well said, Billy. And I want to add even another layer that I really see as part of this research. And it's sometimes it can be an uncomfortable truth to understand. But what Billy said was spot on. We're what's called conscious co-creators of reality. The world is mostly made up of people that don't realize the power that they have. So essentially what happens is they allow the creating of that reality through consciousness through others. So others direct them. This is how I should feel. This is how I should think. Therefore, that's what I project. So the reality that's around us is almost somewhat of an illusion, because it's based largely on, well, the old paradigm of control through fear and manipulation, but it is eroding. It's eroding all around us. And I'm looking very positively towards the future, but there are things right now that need to be known. What's going on in the Middle East right now with Afghanistan is the same story in a similar sense in terms of what ISIS was used for. Not the goddess of Egypt, the terrorist group that was funded. There's a lot of evil still that rules our world. That doesn't mean that we just accept it and then allow it to continue. We accept it, but then we decide to make changes. We take back our creative responsibility on this planet and not let them do it. And what I mean by that is, when you trace all the dark money and origins, things that happen under the table at the CIA, Federal Reserve, the central bank, what you find is, unfortunately, a system of funding secretly either conflict through wars or in some ways creating and fueling a terrorist organization. It really all goes back, and I'm not going to go down this hole too far, but it really goes back to everything from 9/11 to everything that happened with ISIS to everything that the Taliban are doing now. If you have an economy that's 70% based on the military funding, you have to have justification for that spending. Imagine if, let's say, we went through 10 years of no war, and then we had Senate hearings where they're looking at the budget and they're like, why are we still paying 70% of the GDP of the entire United States towards the military when we don't need to anymore? Mm-hmm. Well, to prevent that, and on many, many other levels, you essentially create conflict. But more importantly, you create a conflict in a very specific way that can be used as propaganda for fear. Yes, there's terrible things happening in Afghanistan. Yes, there are people suffering, and that's absolutely horrible. But the other thing we got to understand is it's part of us being controlled through fear and then allowing and almost pushing for military action. Okay, that's what this is, to restart the wheels of the military industrial complex. And we have to look at this and say, Afghanistan needs help with the people through all these organizations that can help them, but we don't need to go into war. There's other ways to resolve this, okay? The Taliban are being used as a tool. They're used as a tool for fear in the population, and they're being used as a tool for military intervention. And I just want to say that, like what Billy said, we're conscious co-creators here. We can choose to reject that message of fear and war, and instead project a completely different message. And I think that era of them having this control is getting smaller and smaller. And there's tactics. This is all they have left. Taliban is all they have left. This has been in their back pocket for a while, right? They sort of let them, do their thing, and then here we are. This is their last card. So let's reject what's going on in terms of having a fear-based economy that's pushing towards war. And remember what Billy said, we're the co-creators here. We need to take back our power to co-create a world that's not based on war, corruption, and materialism.
Yep, absolutely.
So I have two things to that, which is clearly from behind the scenes, it's evident to a whole lot more people now, and not just, I would say, the U.S. government, obviously, but many governments, they're backhanded deals and shadow deals to keep the military-industrial complex just moving along. It's clearly in their best interest, and it's clearly in the interest of them holding their power. And so, for most people, I think that even want to delve into that, it's well documented. That's not a conspiracy theory. We have all of these things, from false flag attacks to to simply just getting rid of leaders when they no longer are interested in doing what the government says. So it's evident that that's kind of where we are, and that is eroding, because you can see it's clear that a lot of people are having some issues believing anything that the government says, to the point that they don't believe anything anyone says anymore. So we swing completely over to that end. But I wanted to throw two things on you guys that you just mentioned. Matt, you mentioned that a lot of people don't understand the power that they have, and Billy, it's something that you actually said previously in the other podcast. So my question to you guys, first off, would be, how does one know the limit of their power? And what are you supposed to do in general? If I'm living in a collective consciousness, and you say I have a tunnel, you say I can affect this, well, clearly, just like some people have natural inherent talents. And when I had Dean Radin on the podcast, he spoke about this. I mean, there must be people there are geniuses in math, there are geniuses in sports, there are guys born with different talents. Are there some people among us who are the Michael Jordan of affecting their reality? And do we know who they are? Are they all celebrities or something like this? Or are these people who we don't know, and they're a monk somewhere, and they're simply enjoying helping the world through being peaceful and meditating and knowing that they're making a difference?
Right.
And what does that mean for the everyday person?
I think Billy Carson's a start, because I think he's one of those people.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Well,
Appreciate
perfect.
it. Well, that's
Answer,
that's a big compliment. Wow. I think that there are people here that are able to find a way to break through the matrix a lot easier than others. It's just like, I was teaching a manifest destiny workshop last year, and we were talking about how to manifest your reality financially, because people were struggling and they're trying to figure out, how can I get to the next level so I can take care of my family better? And one person, was asking a question during the workshop. Well, I'm doing meditation and I'm trying to eat better and I'm trying to be healthy and I'm trying to be positive and everything else. But there's someone that I know that's totally negative, that's totally just, just evil and nasty, treats people bad, and is always able to manifest money a lot easier for their family. And so you have to understand that manifesting is a frequency, and some people are just resonating on that frequency regardless of what they do otherwise. They just have that ability. There's people that are born into this world with the epigenetic memory of only being successful. And their bloodline and their family line have always had that particular talent to manifest money, to manage money, to understand how to utilize it, to understand how to leverage it. And it went down from generation to generation to generation. And they don't even understand the concept of poverty, or they don't even understand the concept of not being late on a light bill. It's not even in their brain. It never existed in their mind. So regardless of the other things that they do, that particular talent just seems to be innate in them. And I think that goes for almost anything you could think of in the universe. And so there are people here that are able to have resonate on a better frequency to understand how to control their reality tunnel, to create the reality that they want for themselves. to manipulate the matrix itself and to know how to play in the matrix. So the matrix is here and there's no way to get out of it, but you can manipulate it. You can bend it. You can bend it to your will. And so I think that there are people here. And so some people who may not have that or realize that they have that innate ability, it may take them a little bit more effort, a little bit more practice, more meditation, more affirmations, more positive mindset, more brain heart coherence, things like that, where they have to really check themselves on a consistent basis and make sure that they're in alignment with themselves. And, just all these things that they'll have to do, maybe more than another person. When I want to manifest something, I can literally just focus on it and it just comes into my reality. Where somebody else, it may take them, a little bit more effort than me. And for whatever reason, it could just be that I'm on some particular frequency where these things just really easily flow to me. And somebody else may have to go through a process, more of a ritualistic type of a process to help bring that into their reality. But overall, I believe that everyone has the ability. We all have the ability to reprogram our DNA, which is really helping to bend that matrix code. Because if you say positive affirmations 3 times a day for 21 days, scientifically proven, peer-reviewed science, you will reprogram, you will rewrite your DNA. We can also overcome the effect of epigenetic memories. Every person has 15 to 20 generations of epigenetic memories from their ancestors in their bodies. Again, more peer-reviewed science. So what happened to my ancestors, throughout slavery and everything else, all that's inside of my body. The PTSD, the fear, the tortures, the pain, the anguish, and all that stuff is inside of me. And so that can cause people to have, feelings of neglect, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. And they can be like, my life is great. Why am I feeling like this? It's in the epigenetics. And so again, positive affirmations, knowing how to align with your brain heart coherence and practicing that, and all the things that it takes to really work on yourself, become a master of self, will allow you to then be more effective in manifesting and manipulating your reality tunnel. But the people that don't know about this and they succumb to these emotions and these feelings and can't figure out where they came from and fall into deep depressions, which is so real, they end up becoming a victim of their own biology, and it holds them back in so many different ways. So it really becomes a part of educating yourself about yourself, who you are, how to reprogram yourself, how to maintain a high frequency vibration, operating in gratitude, operating in service to others, operating in in meditation, healthy eating, exercise, grounding, getting out in nature and physically grounding with the earth, so you can take those negative ions into the body and you can get rid of that positive charge, so that you can become more in resonant frequency with the planet, which adds a lot of healing, takes away inflammation, takes away brain fog, makes you think better, all these things. So there's a huge list of things which I talk about in a lot of my classes to try to get people to become better, at being able to do these things.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to what Billy said there. That was really well said. Essentially, think of it as if we were like an antenna for a specific signal. That signal only could be obtained through a certain vibrational frequency. Okay, think of it that way. It's almost like if you have a radio and the radio is turned to the wrong station. Okay, and that wrong station would be like a lower vibrational frequency. As beings, if you like in the back here, this banner I have, we have chakra centers of energy up our spinal cord that represent the different levels of vibrational frequency that we are obtaining on a molecular level. That's the core of what we are. Like Billy said, you can alter your DNA. You actually can. You actually can alter your entire DNA structure by what he said, focusing on certain paths and goals, and then obtaining a certain health status within yourself so that your body can reflect the vibration you're trying to achieve. Someone who is unhealthy but still loves to read and do all this stuff is not going to be able to obtain that certain higher state unless they can actually get their body in that healthy state, not drinking the tap water with fluoride and chlorine in it, but going to get spring water, eating healthy foods, exercising, like Billy said, getting out and getting connected with nature, grounding yourself. Then start to work with things like you have to sit down and start meditating and understanding, getting to the higher states of your vibration that are non-materialistic, closing your eyes and tuning to a higher energetic state and then manifesting that in your life. It's very difficult. And one of the things that I remember when I started this whole process was I had called it holding your light, the light of higher consciousness, because holding it meant you have conversations with people that are like-minded like this, and you feel that higher state of energy from connecting and talking about this. And you may hold that awareness and that feeling for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to perhaps collapse. And you're going to fall back into a different state of energy, and you may start to recognize that. And the second you become aware of your energy changing, you can then focus on only having it be at that higher state. And as you do that, you become like a beacon or a lighthouse in the darkness to guide all the rest of them, because we have a resonant frequency field that gets created around us that becomes larger and more influential based on the higher vibration we can obtain. That's why ancient monks in Tibet would go up on top of mountains and meditate and project their vibrational frequency and energy out into the world to try to raise up the rest of the humans there, because we have lived in such a history of misinformation and suppression and misrepresenting of what we really are, and understanding all of these gifts that we have, that most of society is living in that state of being almost asleep. And I don't blame them for that. It's a system of control. And it was, for me on my personal journey, it was very difficult to break free of that. It would often be, I remember having sessions where you'll listen to some audiobook or watch some incredible video or read a book, and all of a sudden you'll be like, I feel like I understand and I feel really different right now. But then the next morning you wake up and you sort of go back to that old controlled mindset that holds on. It doesn't seem to want to let go of its grip on you. Is you have to work hard. You have to do it on a daily basis, because what Billy talks about all the time, it's about reprogramming the mind and your DNA. And the only way to do that is to cleanse yourself of things like fluoride and decalcify your pineal gland in order to have your third eye truly see the non-physical reality that actually binds us here. We are physical beings that are spiritual in nature, but having a physical experience here. And we have to understand that everything is about experience, and everyone is on a different level. But like Billy said, everyone has the potential in them to be those creators and to reach those higher states. Will, you asked in the very beginning, what is the higher state that person can achieve, and can everyone achieve that? I think that everyone can, but we all have different challenges and difficulties to get there. Whether it's karma from past lives or traumas that stay within us that we need to take care of. We cannot move forward with energy unless we get rid of all those negative things that hold us back. It truly is like a cleanse of the mind and body. And I got to tell you, this road to get here, so many challenges and so difficult. You lose so many friends, you change and you meet new friends. Life can be very challenging, but in the end, this is truly what matters in this existence more than anything else. This is our purpose here, is to, once we move past the more primitive sides of our nature, we have to look at the bigger picture and understand that we are not animals on this planet. We're stewards of this earth. We're designed perfectly and specifically for the density and ratios of this terrestrial body to be in perfection here. So we have to remember that. And I think the last thing I just want to say is that there have been times all throughout history when great sages and masters have emerged in society. They look forward every year when they're trying to find the new Buddha, not every year, but every time they have a transition. And it's because we live lifetime after lifetime in different bodies, but we're all, those grand masters and sages talked about in antiquity, they're here right now, because this is the great show. The great show, when you get transition from a negative polarity of Pisces to a positive polarity of Aquarius. The more negative a time period is, it's always balanced by the more positive another one will be. So this is our time period when co-creators need to come together to create, to reach that next age. It's always been called the next golden age, and that's what we're heading towards. So I hope everybody remembers that, and all the great sages that are out there, this is the time right now.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's such an interesting thing, because that transition and these type of things, they can't happen unless you're conscious, right? You can't become truly great at anything if you're unconscious. And so it's wildly important for people to understand how important it is, like you said, you can't overstate the importance of keeping a clean and disciplined and trying to discipline your mind in order to do that. Because you will never know what sort of junk and things you're accepting from the outside. You won't even know what you have inside, right? Like from your own biology. If you can't stop to listen. So there's and it is a good thing to see, regardless of if mindfulness has become a buzzword in that sense for maybe some businesses and stuff like that. It's regardless, because we all know that if you just get people to meditate, and essentially if you get people to stop and just calm, that there will be good things happen. You will start to have an awareness, even if you set out to use mindfulness to go to the stock market and that was your, it's just it really doesn't matter. At a certain point, that awareness will start to kick in. And so you guys touched on something a little bit, and I want to throw it just a little bit to history again with the idea of a collective consciousness. Do you guys believe truly, or is there evidence to suggest that there was a proper global society in the past? Because we're taught essentially that they're not. Even the great civilizations, whenever they popped up, were essentially taught that they more or less they were there, then they fell out. And was there, according to you guys or what you've seen, ever a civilization or a time period in our past where these truths were understood and humanity was in that state? I mean, maybe not a true utopia, but something more elevated than where we're at now.
Well, I think that there were definitely, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that we had achieved golden ages in the ancient past. One particular is the Atlantean civilization. I don't believe it was just a ringed circle city and that was Atlantis. I think Atlantis, in my opinion, was not even just a global civilization, because there's evidence of these Atlanteans all over the planet. I think it was an interplanetary.
I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry to cut you off, but for the people that have no idea what Atlantis is,
okay,
could you throw it? Yeah. Could you throw it to?
Well, Atlantis is a super ancient civilization, deep antiquity, of beings that came to this planet, in my opinion, from what I've read so far, beings that came to this planet and kind of really created a breakaway civilization, so to speak. In other words, a civilization that where they left their home planets and they came here and they utilized this planet for resources, created their own cities, their own kingdoms, so to speak, where they ruled. They had capitals all over the planet, and they achieved high levels of civilization. This is antediluvial. This is before the big floods, that happened. And
10,000 years ago, roughly.
Even further than that. Yeah.
Way further.
Way further back than that. And so these beings, in my opinion, seem to have had achieved a high level. And some of the remnants of texts that were left behind, including some of the Emerald tablets, Thoth talks about incredible levels of advanced technology, spiritual technology, also things like understanding how to use photons and cymatic frequencies to manifest matter into existence. Understanding how to use cymatics to alter your reality tunnel and change the effect that things were going to have on you in your life. Just so many different great things that are talked about spiritually and technologically, and even sometimes a combination of both, that led me to believe that there was an advanced civilization that ruled over this planet, that had many capitals. I was just down in Akrotiri in Greece. I went over to Santorini, went to Akrotiri, where there's an Atlantean city, is what they actually call it, an Atlantean city that's buried by volcanic ash. They had 4-story houses there. The evidence has already been tested. These are 4,000-year-old houses that use steel rebar inside the poured molded concrete brick structure. Toilets on the second floor, PVC type piping, running plumbing throughout the entire city. It's where I was at the dig site. This is all on video. And so we're talking about very high level technologically, very high level spiritually. And I believe that even after the Great Flood, there was one more small golden age that occurred in the land of Kem, where you had the Dogon tribe that were ruling over the land of Kem. They had entered into a golden age, and they didn't have an army. They had no police force. They had no crime. And then, unfortunately, though, that was like a beacon for some people, and said, "You're going to take this over," and they took it over and then they ended up migrating out to Mali, Africa. But there have been smaller golden ages that have cropped up, but I think there was once a massive global golden age.
Yeah. And, can I expand on that really quickly?
Please, yeah, please.
So, the more that I've studied the ancient indigenous cultures of Peru and Bolivia, looking at the discussions that come out of when you talk to those people and you look at the evidence of locations like 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 and 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, these strange sites of H blocks and perfectly laser cut stones with these giant gateways, what they talk about is that there was once two continents that no longer exist on the planet. Now, the information for those two places has been largely lost. It's only contained in a couple minor places. And I know this is new to some people, so I'll go over it. But in Bolivia and Peru, we find ancient megalithic stone masonry and everything from Machu Picchu and the pre-Inca, and Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and all those sites, and to the other ones near Lake Titicaca that I spoke about, like 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 and 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. They speak of their progenitors, their ancestors, coming from an ancient land called Mu, M-U. Okay, that was existing at the same time as Atlantis. Okay, Mu was the Pacific civilization, the ancient civilization that reached great states, that was from the Hawaiian Islands down through Fiji and over to Easter Island. That was the area of the land of Mu. Now, when that was being destroyed, the fragment of it that remained was called Lemuria. That's what all those ancient stories that come from Hawaii all the way down through Tonga and all the way over to South America, there was an advanced civilization that lived there. At the same time, in the Atlantis, we find through Plato's writing of the Timaeus and Critias that those stories were carried down from an ancient politician named Solon. Solon was a Greek politician who traveled to Egypt, one of the first Westerners to ever go to Egypt, and he met with the priests and the high priests of Egypt at that time, and they told him a great story. They said that their ancestors that created all of Egypt and the pyramids, known as the region of Kem that Billy mentioned, was a breakaway group that came from Atlantis, and that before them was another continent that was west of the Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, in the mid-Atlantic, right where the ridge is, where all the earthquakes and things can happen. There was another subcontinent there called Atlantis, and it had two capital cities, Poseidon and Atlas. And those two cities ruled this continent. Now, here's what's interesting. I want to connect all of this. They speak about how there was a great war back then, both on a physical level with war, but also on a level of nature and the gods. It was basically a time when Mu Lemuria was described as a divine feminine energy of creation, a place that was more in tune with nature. You can see remnants of that in places like Sulawesi in Indonesia, and some of the islands like Borobudur, some of the temples on those islands. There are remnants of those cultures in those Southeast Asian areas. It was is a very different design. They were more in tune with nature. It was a civilization based on knowledge and spirituality as its focus. Now, Atlantis is spoken about as starting like that, but then taking a completely different path, becoming obsessed with wealth and military power, and eventually using technologies to literally disrupt the entire electromagnetic field of the Earth, and was one of the catalysts for these great Earth changes that looks like it came along and basically destroyed everything in the ancient world. And what we're talking about now is, we don't even know if this is what's known as the Younger Dryas disasters that occurred at the end of the last ice age 12,000 years ago. This may be from a previous age that we're hearing about this. Like maybe it's 37,000 years ago. We don't know, but we know in these increments that there were great civilizations here that were in stages destroyed. They all write the same thing, that it didn't happen at one moment. Parts of these continents and areas were like wiped out because ocean levels were rapidly fluctuating and the Earth was going through really huge changes. Volcanoes are going off everywhere, earthquakes. So the people of these subcontinents, the mystics and the secret societies, all grouped together, and they went off to different parts of the world to recreate civilization, because they knew, based on all the information they had, understanding the cycles of the zodiacs and the energy of the sun, the planets, they knew that there was going to be, and this is what they write about, a final set of tsunamis, tidal waves that would destroy everything in the world. All of the ancient cultures that were on these continents would be destroyed. So these bands of mystics went off to sites like Tiwanaku, Bolivia, Machu Picchu, Saskatchewan, Ollantaytambo, up through the Americas, Chichen Itza, down through Palenque, and Teotihuacan, right? All across the world, creating Kem, the pyramids of Egypt, Göbekli Tepe. These in a lot of areas in Anatolia and around the Mediterranean, they attempted to create an entirely new set of civilizations that would also be mapped with the stars and the ley lines of the earth to try to prevent the entire catastrophe of the world. Okay, those continents were being destroyed. Imagine these civilizations are rising up to almost race to try to balance it. They're creating enormous libraries woven into silica of megalithic temples that we can't even understand because they're not in third dimensional writing. Libraries are deep underground underneath Egypt. Göbekli Tepe, they were burying it at this time because they knew that these disasters were coming, to try to protect all these sites, hiding things in caves. Then what happens? The cataclysms come through just as they predicted, and nearly everything is destroyed. The progenitors of those civilizations find these temples, mostly destroyed, and try to attempt to build on top of them. And the knowledge every time, because there's a series of different events that seem to occur throughout history, the knowledge is lost more and more every epoch until you get to the point where we're at now, over the last 5,000, 6,000 years, where humanity is a shell of its former self, and we have fallen from a state of grace to completely forgetting our understanding of spirituality and our connection with the cosmos. And we're trying to get back there as soon as we can, so we don't get wiped out again.
Exactly. Perfectly said.
Yeah, and I've always wondered, though, for that to be for that to have happened, and for us to have at least some shards of the truth of these great civilizations that existed. You know, we don't understand necessarily how the pyramids are built, I guess, depending on who you ask, right? Some people will just say, oh, well, they just carried it like this, that, and the other, you know. But there are a whole ton of megalithic structures all over the earth that we really cannot truly understand, or we're not supposed to, because the civilizations that were there at that time, they're also painting them maybe as nomadic cultures, with spears, just kind of hunting, and then they just happen to know how to build, maybe something,
Yeah, right.
Exquisite. Yeah. So you mentioned spiritual technology, and this is something that I've always been curious about. Some of the smartest minds in the world, I know, are constantly trying to come up with new things. And if they have an understanding of this knowledge, then whether they're in the government or in a private sector, they must be trying to come up with these things based on the texts and things. So my question is, what is it? What did those previous civilizations have that was so far off? Because, even 100 years ago, our phones and the fact that we're having this conversation is magic, right? To them. We can't possibly even understand what the word spiritual technology, I don't even know that I've ever heard that. For someone to even understand it, I guess it could look like, attaching something to your brain is what we would, we're so materialistic in that sense. That's what it is. And it's here. This is the seat of our consciousness. But what is that? What would that be? Do you guys have any understanding of what possibly even like daily life was like for them, and what we are trying to create here that is allowing people to tap into things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about mastering coherent thought waves. And so we know that every thought that we think, including every thought that everyone's thinking right now watching this show, is creating a wave of light that actually penetrates out of the skull. And so this is why we know that the Akashic records and the book of life is real, because every thought that was ever thought about from every sentient being in the entire universe exists in space-time, just like the radio waves from I Love Lucy from the 1960s are still floating through space right now. And if you have the right machinery, you can pick up that frequency. So now what's interesting about our light waves is I'm thinking a thought, it leaves my skull. And we know this because if I put a cap on you with sensors on it, I can send that light wave to a computer and I can analyze it on a computer system. So that light wave that leaves your skull is encoded with information. Each one of those waves of frequency waves. We can't see the lights because human beings can only see 1% of the light wave frequency. But those light waves are there. They're waves of light, and they're encoded with information data. Once you can master your coherent thought wave patterns, and then you create technology that receives those coherent thought waves, like if you're driving a car, you don't have to drive the car with your hands and your eyes, wait for visual input and then manual control. You can think where you're going, and you can control the vehicle from thought. You can control the airplane or the spaceship or whatever you're flying, the vessel you're traveling in, from coherent thought waves. If you want to make a phone call, you have an earbud in your ear and you just think about who you're going to call, and then the device will call that person, and then from there you can have your conversation. And even deeper in the future, you don't even have to move your mouth. It can all be done through what seems to be psychic abilities. I did a workshop where I was talking about manifesting your destiny last year. And there's a segment in there where I show a video from a technology company. They have this crown that just sits on your head. This crown picks up your light waves. And then that crown connects to your appliances in your house. It connects to even a remote control car. And so through coherent thought, you're able to move this remote control car around and backwards and forwards and turning left and right, all based on thought. You can activate a refrigerator, you can activate a microwave, you can activate, turn on and off lights by thinking. So when you look into these ancient tablets, it seems to me as if some of the things that they're describing seems to be merged technology in with spiritual consciousness. So they've mastered the ability with coherent thought waves and tech to give them these godlike abilities. There's this one kid at Harvard University, I believe it was. He invented a device that sits over your ear and is tapped into this bone right here so that you can send and receive sound waves without anybody else hearing it, instead of going in the ear, right through the bone. But there's also this device which sits on the crown and comes around the ear. It's connected to the internet. So if you ask him a question, he then thinks of the question and queries it to Google virtually from conscious, coherent thought. And then the answer comes back to the bone and transfers the information that he can hear in his head, and he can spit back to you what the answer is. I don't care what you ask him. Whatever's available on the internet, he can give you the answer. Now imagine that it is 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, maybe even now today, you don't know this technology exists. You're going to think this guy is God, right? He knows everything. You can ask him, how do I do surgery on a kidney or whatever? I mean, this guy's going to give you the answer. And so that type of ability gave these beings this godlike power, or, we thought it was godlike power, but they just really had advanced knowledge and advanced technology. They had the spiritual technology. They were connected to these systems through coherent thought waves, and they even understood cymatics to the point where they can even manifest solid matter. And so that all that to us seems godlike, but in true reality, it's just understanding how to manipulate space, time, the ether, and conscious light waves and cymatics.
Yeah, and let me just add something to that. Absolutely, Billy. We used to have a lot of gifts and talents that we've forgotten. That
Absolutely.
fall that I mentioned after all of these catastrophes have brought us down to the level we're at. That knowledge of how to obtain all those states and do all those things was largely lost. And so we are like children, that we're like the children of men, right? A great movie. That just don't really seem to understand what we really are or what we can do to manipulate the forces of nature. Remember, if you think about where we came from, I just did a great show this morning before this on Eridu and the importance of Eridu. We were created there, according to the tablets, to be in the image of the gods. In Sumer, they called them the Anus or Anunnaki or Anuna, and we were created in their image of perfection. We are a god that exists in a physical form as like an experiment to really see where this could go. And it's been interesting how the experiment's gone so far. But in essence, we had gifts and abilities that we have lost largely now. We used to have, you look at the King's List and all the different tablets, humans used to live a lot longer. Humans used to have abilities like telekinesis and various abilities that we lost now. But one of the things they understood was their role in the universe in material matter. So when you look at sites like, let's give an example, Baalbek, Lebanon, there's a block there called the Trilithon that weighs 1,100 tons. It would essentially be like the size of a small school building, or like maybe 20 SUVs, or 20 trucks, I should say, 18 wheelers. It's enormous. It is so enormous that today we aren't even sure we could even move it. Cranes can only have a certain maximum weight ability of 500 tons, say, is the common. So when we're looking at these blocks and we're just saying, oh, they easily could have built that, well, or moved it. Well, how? Well, then you go from that site to Egypt in places like the Valley Temple, and you see blocks that are, over 100 tons. And then you go across the world to Peru and Bolivia, and you see these insane blocks that are put up way up on these huge walls that are essentially hundreds of tons, perfectly carved, moved in these positions that are so precise that we can't even mimic it today. So how did they do that? How do they do that stuff? Well, there's an interesting place in Florida called Coral Castle that was constructed by a mysterious man who seems to have figured out, using a combination of Nikola Tesla's work and the ancient science of what they used to do. And he mysteriously moved all these giant limestone blocks into position, and nobody knows how he did it. People that have supposedly saw him say he did it alone, and he did it through some kind of a chanting of his voice and a certain intention. And some people watching this will be like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" Well, again, gets back to the idea that we are much greater than we have been made to believe, and we currently believe. Back then, the ancients had other gifts that we've lost now, but we can still get those back. But it's one of those things that takes time for us to change our genetics back and get back to that other place that we used to be in. Well, so what do they do? Well, I see it as two different ways that they built these. One, there were literally demigods here that were the direct bloodline descendants of the original beings that created us, that were truly magical. And I mean that with a K at the end. They literally were called gods because they could manipulate the forces of nature. And this is what I've come to after really trying to figure this out. They could literally control the forces of nature, and they could just move the block with their mind wherever they wanted. Boom. Then there were other sages and mystics that came below them who are like people like us, but they still had the understanding and abilities. And so they could potentially move some things, but it was more focused, it seems like, on this organizational of mentally focusing their mind to do it, and perhaps through like chanting certain deep sounds used in a certain focus of that that energy it's been shown in labs to like move objects. So the science is there, but it's in a completely different direction than conventional thinking is, where you have a crane and it's just manual force labor moving something. So there was literally magic that existed back in the day, and that was because you had their Hermetic law of correspondence, as above, so below. They mirrored the temples across the earth, right? Giza, Teotihuacan, right up through, like I was talking about with Eridu and Göbekli Tepe and sites around the world, were literally mirrors of constellations in the heavens. And when you did that, you obtained the energy of the cosmos to create literally a world of energy and magic here. And that when all those temples were destroyed, that connection was canceled, and we lost all of that, right? The ladder to heaven was withdrawn, and we basically had to start over again. But that's really what we're talking about, is these abilities that used to exist that could come back again if we just would listen to the wisdom of the ancients.
Right. Absolutely, Matt. Absolutely.
The story of Coral Castle is a fascinating one also, by the way. So for anybody who hasn't heard that, from what I can remember just off the top of my head, either his wife or someone had broken up with him. He built the entire complex as a dedication to someone, I believe. And it's not understood exactly. You can still go there today. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, just mentioning what you said about the cranes, I believe there was a swinging door to Coral Castle that he had somehow managed to get a massive stone door that anyone, like a kid, could just come up and push. But it eroded or it broke sometime after he'd passed, and we can't fix it. we like tried to put some sort of hinges, like with our modern technology, we can't fix it, so it leaves this mystery out for, somebody who may have, truly discovered something, incredible. But I want to just move to touching on, I listened to another podcast that was talking about the benefits of sleep, and they went down an interesting tangent when they started to talk about how they feel as if humans are losing their touch to sleep and what sleep does for us, and meditation and connection to nature and the other world. And, I myself have had some precognitive dreams, that I didn't ask for, but that, turned out to be real. And so, what do you think that the relationship was for some of these ancient societies, their daily life and all the distractions and things that we have, computers and all the stuff that we need in order to do some of those ancient things, just to have this conversation, right? In a perfect world, if we had telepathy and, and we could all just travel or whatever it is, what do you guys feel how important is that portion of us, where it feels like it's possible, even in an unconscious way, that if we even went back 200, 300 years before electronics and before the advent of us, where being distracted was considered to be normal, because that's just the way it is now. Do you guys feel that sleep and dreams and the dream state, do you think that was more natural to someone, even just a few hundred years back? And if so, what that meant for, we have countless number of things that have been created from dreams, even up into modern time. And obviously the ancients have definitely talked about that, but it seems that maybe they had a more conscious control, which is what someone can use, lucid dreaming and stuff like that. Do you feel that if we don't, because the way that we are blending with our technology, and you mentioned the guys with the Google, and you got Neuralink coming from, Elon Musk, and if we get attached to these things, does that mean we lose that forever? If I don't run,
Mhm.
you lose leg muscle. It's gone. Like if you just lay in bed, it's over.
Right.
So what do you guys feel about that? And how did they do that? And how did they keep that balance?
That's going to be interesting, to see how everything works. And I know sleep is definitely important. Some people need more sleep than others. That's just a fact. For some reason, some people can get away with a lot less sleep. But you can see it in two different ways. Now, one way, I don't know, 8 hours to me seems a little bit much sometimes, just because you only have 24 hours in a day. And if you sleep for 8 and you work for 8, that's 16. Then you got to commute to work. Usually that's 2 hours, an hour up, an hour back, usually. And then you got to eat. That's another 3 hours. Leaves you a couple hours to surf the internet and make a couple of Instagram posts. And day starts over again. You really didn't get anything done for yourself and for your legacy. So it kind of makes it tough. So I try to reduce it a little bit. But what I do when I go to sleep, I don't do it all the time. I try to have controlled dreams where I actually go in under my controlled dream state. And it depends on what I'm working on. If I'm trying to manifest something, if I'm trying to create something, if I'm trying to come up with ideas about things, or if I just I've worked so hard for so many weeks that I don't have a way to get to a vacation right away, then I'll take myself on a vacation in my own dream. And so I try to have controlled dreams as much as possible, where I'm actually accomplishing something while I'm in the dream state. And I think that that's probably nothing new. I think that people in ancient times probably had really truthfully mastered a lot of that, and really were able to travel to realms. Thoth talks about astral travel, leaving out of the body and traveling throughout the universe and things like that. So I think it's probably, it was very, very common if you can get to those higher levels of dream state consciousness. But I do believe it's very easy to do controlled dreams, because I've been doing it now for probably 20 years.
Before you touch in there, Matt, were you a natural lucid dreamer or a controlled dreamer, or was that something that you had to learn? And if so, how?
It didn't seem difficult to me, to be quite honest. The first thing I said was, I wonder if I can just control these dreams. I was having random dreams. I was like, I wonder if I can control the dream to a certain extent. There are going to be some ambiguous and some anomalous things that occur. It's hard to get around those things. But for the most part, the storyline of what I'm trying to do, can I go in and do it? And so I just made a conscious effort to do that. And I was like, wow, that actually worked. And I had better memory of the dream when I woke up versus being completely lost as to what happened and trying to figure out what happened. And so the more you do it, obviously anything you do, the more you do, the better you get. But it wasn't, I think most people can do it right away.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's been truly lost in our society that the ancients understood was the need for resting both the body and the mind during intervals in order to give it the clarity that it needed. We live in such a society of bombarding us with working most of our life and then not having time to explore any of these things, let alone focusing your energy in the right place. But I know if you think about like long ago, if you were an ancient culture before, before all the technologies we have that bombard us with signals all over the place, imagine yourself having time to go into an ancient temple, a temple built of perfection with stonework rising up to the heavens with light streaming through. And you sit down on a bench and you pick up some incredible book of the ancients that speaks about times long ago gone and wisdom that they had. That environment is a significant part towards understanding that information and being able to raise your conscious level, because you're able to focus in the perfect setting and environment, focus your mind on that energy of that temple and looking at that book and that earth energy connected to the ground and all those things. And the people back then were not bombarded by all these signals that we have today. You drive down the road, everyone's Wi-Fi signals hitting you as you go by, disrupting those neural energetic links to your higher consciousness. You're tapping yourself immediately into watching TV or on a computer screen, and we are losing connection with what we need the most to bring us back, and that's the earth and quiet and being in tune with the stars and going out in some night where the light pollution is gone and really seeing the wisdom of the cosmos coming into you, like that antenna that I spoke about. We have to remember that this society that we exist in is bombarding us with these signals and these things, and it's having a great effect on our ability to be a spiritual being. It's causing us to just be like an Elon Musk hybrid AI being, and it's very, very dangerous in my opinion. We can use technology for incredible things, like these great conversations with all over the world with us sitting here at the same moment, but seamless. Seeing ancient sites that you maybe can never visit, but you get an incredible high def 360-degree image to almost be there. Technology can be used for wondrous things, but it can also be used to be completely distracting individuals away from seeking knowledge in books and understanding those things. So we have to be very careful about where it's going and just realize the technology that we have available to us.
Absolutely.
I would echo that. Yeah, as well. It's a tough thing though, right? Because we're all born into this. I mean, everyone has to, as you guys say, reprogram the mind and reprogram that. And it's something we learned rather than it being natural. What a crazy different society it would be if, for instance, meditation was a 45-minute class you had to take Monday to Friday throughout grade school, high school, and then you could major in it in college. Like, I don't even want to know what that person, would look like. The consciousness, the difference would be astounding,
Incredible,
right? From someone.
Yeah.
And so it does beg the question, and this is just the last two things I just want to get in. It begs the question, number one, if so many people out there have recognized it and so many people have understood this, and there are governments that have wings of their governments that do understand these things and these advancements in technology. Why is it not prevalent? Is that by nature for you guys? Do you guys feel as if it is being suppressed, or do you feel as if we are also possibly just allowing that to happen because it's better for me to just go home and then watch Kevin Hart talk a little bit and just go to sleep or whatever, so we kind of want the distraction at this point, it seems like. And also it could be that they're just making sure, I say they, but it could be some people who understand how powerful it is are making it as if hey, you don't need to do that, so I don't know what you guys feel, or is there a balance between the both of them?
Yeah. Well, I think that, we're a product of the system that they've, taught to us from the time you're very young. The first thing you're given is a name, a race, and religion, and you spend the rest of your life defending a false identity. You don't even know who you are. And then you get into a educational system institution, and where they program you and take away your dreams and all the other things, the creativity, and put you into a box and stamp you and go down this, down this line here. This is, this conveyor belt's going to take you to the end where you're going to be, have a chance to become a doctor or a lawyer or attorney, which most people never become. And then they fall off. They go to college and they rarely ever even do what they went to college for. But I think that if we were to change the educational system and really find out through different types of aptitude tests what a child's passions are and what their natural abilities are, and then focus on those passions and natural abilities and put them in special classes just to focus mostly on that. They still have to learn some of the other things, but to focus on that and let them develop and grow those abilities and passions, as well as teaching them things like meditation and mindfulness. This planet would look totally different right now. Like it wouldn't be recognizable to us right now. We'd open our eyes and we'd think that we were on another planet. And so I think that's where things need to be and where they need to go. Eventually in the future, I think we'll get to that point,
Yeah, and that was essentially what the title of my first book, The Illusion of Us, that was the whole purpose behind that title, is that we live in a great illusion here. We live in an illusion based on certain archetypal creations of how things should be, how we should think, who we should associate with, what we should be doing in our life with our time. And it has created what is sometimes loosely called like the matrix of reality here. It is what's woven into what we think of as what we should be doing, who we are, all those things. That's this system here. Now, part of that growth process and the difficulty of what we were talking about earlier of reaching those higher states of consciousness is realizing that exists, seeing it from an objective observer, meaning from the outside, and looking at it and saying, well, I still have to play the game because you have to, because that's the way reality has been designed, but I can choose to make changes to it and bring conscious awareness towards a different kind of version, right? It didn't need to be like this. In fact, the more that I've studied it, and Billy has too, and we obviously absolutely have the same opinion, it was very much a very clever design, actually, to create a system of productivity through the masses with conformity and thought. It started, you can actually trace it to one single moment in history when Constantine decided to reforge the Roman Empire to become the Holy Roman Empire. And at that point was when you found the rewriting of most of those ancient texts, the Christian texts that became the Abrahamic religions of the world, and then carrying out towards things like money being the basis of currency here, rather than what things used to be back in the day, like resources like precious metals and gemstones that have actual value. It became a system that was based on a certain commodity. So some people don't know, but currency started in Sumer with a bushel of wheat, and that was known as a shekel. That was based on the amount of a certain amount of wheat because it was integral to their economy. It was an agricultural based economy, which now most farms are these giant mega farms that aren't even really connected to a lot of society, which is part of that path. It was a division that occurred based on a synthetic, chemical, artificial reality versus one that's natural. Having everything be based on plants, things like hemp, and everything being biodegradable and solar power. Instead of that path, those individuals that wanted to go there were in many cases silenced and just sort of disappeared. And then the others, the powerful organizations of the pharmaceutical industry and the banking industry, and those individuals on that side largely took control of the direction that we would go. And that's why we ended up in such a technological society that's not based on spirituality, that's based on just being a productive drone, not someone like Billy said, where this child of wonder and imagination that's fascinated by something that can contribute in a certain way, instead of being guided with that mentality, it's more of a conformed mentality that destroys those imaginatory areas and just says, look, if you can master this doctrine and get it all right and memorize it, then you can become this and successful. And if you don't, and you don't want to go along with this, well, society through the hierarchy system of schooling and the rest of society will sort of shun you into a corner until you do. And that's where we find ourselves right now. But that's changing. More and more individuals all the time are banding together and realizing this common ancient wisdom that we used to have of who we are and who we were, and it's starting. That system is eroding. It's like a conflict right now of this path that we have right now continuing and this alternate path literally going like side by side right now. And this collective consciousness society, through the war of information, is fighting for us to choose one path or another. And we, as that collective, is largely being steered towards the path of spirituality and oneness and equilibrium balance, because that's where we're supposed to go as the cycles of energy. The ancients knew that. Thank God that was woven into the system, the higher system, not the system we have here, the system of the universe and vibration and frequency, because we are naturally going towards that path, and that old path is being rejected more and more. So you're seeing sort of a hybrid path that's going right now. So the future is going to be interesting, but I'm very, very optimistic because it's that 100th monkey effect. It doesn't take the whole society to change to have this thing alter. It just takes a few of us to provide that beacon in the darkness, so that the rest can sort of realize, where are we going? That's not the way. And then you'll see that light at the other side. I feel like individuals like us on the show and so many others that are fighting for this, we're fighting to both change the narrative of history that's been falsely created, right? Change the view of religion to fall back on spirituality and what we used to be, and then change the direction of how we see ourselves and how we contribute to this world. We need to realize that we're stewards. Clean up the planet. Stop trashing it. Realize, bring back respect for this ancient Earth Gaia that we had once. Let's return to this golden age that we've been leading towards all along.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would definitely say that it's so important for everybody that 100th monkey effect is a pretty crazy thing, because you will definitely notice, and you can notice this. I notice it personally anytime I go to a store and I notice someone who doesn't enjoy their job or their work, or they've fallen prey to this that drone mentality, and they're in a place that they don't want to be in, and they're there just because they need the money, or they're actually not even sure why they're there.
Yeah. Right.
And a lot of times, if you hold a positive, if you hold that positive outlook, that mindset, if you start joking, you can generally pull them right on to your, and then that spreads, right?
Yeah.
And then that spreads, because if it doesn't, you could also sink right down. If you're in the wrong, you don't even want to have to even call it vibration. If you're in the wrong mood, and you meet that person and they feel like crap, and then you suck on that energy, and then you just go to your next place and you spread that. It's crazy to think, we never think like that. But if you just kept spreading this positivity, in a proper, genuine, sincere way, it spreads, and it's this crazy beacon. So I have one last question, if you guys have time for it.
Sure.
If you guys are cool. Okay.
Do you have time, Billy?
Yeah. Are you good, Billy? Or yeah. Okay. This last one deals with time. And you mentioned the Akashic records, which you might want to just give everybody just a quick idea of what that is. But trying to understand time and linear time, the way it's put out towards us, and if you say, for instance, have a precognitive dream where you're sure you got the answer to something in the future, or people have dreams and experiences where they feel like they've gone to the past, or they've gotten knowledge from other things, and it feels as if there's this understanding and shift through time. What did the ancients say about time, and maybe even the cyclical nature of time, or how we as a society, do we have it the same way that they thought? So that would be my,
Yeah, time is totally different now. Clocks exist, time doesn't exist. So, and a lot of them understood that, and even some of the ancient sages understood the reality that we have, that we're living in here, was actually not true reality. They called it sleepy time or dream time, that being awake was the dream time. And, so they understood that this is a holographic illusion in a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways. The Akashic records in particular, it goes way back even into some of the ancient Indian texts. And it's referred to as this record that exists, this energetic plane where information exists, that's got the conscious thought of every single entity, sentient being in the entire universe. Every thought wave exists there and is stored there in this gigantic, energetic computational computer system, if you want to call it that, just to make it, give it an easy way to see it. And so this Akashic record has spelled out everything that you have done, everything that you will do, and everything that you, are doing now, because time is basically, it doesn't exist. So the past, present, and future happen all at once in higher dimensions. So all the information about yourself and what you've done and going to do and are doing is in the Akashic record. Thoth calls it the Book of Life, and that made it into the biblical text. Obviously, religious texts call it the Book of Life, but the Akashic record and the Book of Life, to me, same exact thing. And so it's likened to really what I was saying earlier, is that everything that's happening is energetic in this entire realm. All that energy is stored in this energetic grid. And just like, they found that black holes, initially we thought that if something went into a black hole, it would be torn apart, shredded up, and pulled into pieces. But then we learned that when something goes into a black hole, because information can't be lost, the information is actually stored in the event horizon, stores all the data of whatever it is that's going into the black hole. And so we know that the universe is a natural data storage. So again, as above, so below. We've got USB drives. That's just a below of the massive above. All we do is replicate what already exists on higher planes of existence. And so that's what the Akashic record is. It's a storage medium for information about everything, about every sentient being in the entire universe. And I do believe that the ancients knew that time was an illusion, that the way that we perceive time now has become so mechanical. And we've got to go to this meeting. I'm looking at my clock. I've got to get to another podcast right after this one. And I'm trying to calculate what I've got to do after that. So we're on this mechanical system, and we're on this system where we kind of really become slaves to time, unfortunately. But I think that back in the ancient times, the way that everything was set up, everything was more set back, laid back, and destinies were ordained and things like that. It was a much different way of perceiving time back then.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because we see things in often such a linear way, right? I did this yesterday, and I'm going to do this tomorrow. But like Billy said, that's actually a third dimensional, linear way to look at things. Most of what takes up the multiverse, right, which means the layered universe of possibilities, is made up of non-physical things. It's energy. It's, like Billy said, the storage of all thoughts, everything that's ever been discussed. And someone thinks, "Oh, I just came up with something." No, that term that some people know is called "nothing new under the sun." The ancients once said that everything that we think we're discovering has already been thought, and that it's all already existing because time is an illusion, and that everything is a giant circle. Okay, and what that means is if you start to get out into dimensional thinking and you start to think in a higher way, right? You start to think about realms and spaces that exist beyond what's called the five senses linear world that we see in front of us, right? We have five senses. We see 7 colors in the visible light spectrum, but there's so much else out there that we can't perceive. And one of those things are things like dimensions. So what happens when you move from a third dimensional thinking? So if you go into a meditation session and you're deep in there and you're surrounded by crystals and you get into a deep thought and you feel that you are no longer just your physical body, but you are just like an orb of consciousness that is non-physical, like your spirit. Okay, you've now broken out of the third dimension, and you're now in the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, with the 6 being what perhaps is the highest that as humans currently in our form we can achieve. And what happens is the further you go out of the third dimension, the more time becomes an illusion and disappears. It becomes what's called instantaneous time, meaning that all that matters, the past actually doesn't matter at all. The future doesn't matter. It's only the moment. They realize that the moment you're in is the only thing that exists. So the way that they would reflect time in a place like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is they would only track time based on basically the wobble of the earth, known as the equinoxes. Okay, the shifts that occur when the earth is wobbling on its axis, which constellations it faces for a 2,100 year period. That was time for them. So they were called them ages, right? And they knew that they were in this age, and then this age would come, and each of those ages would be a cyclical nature of polarity. It would be a dualistic nature. So every age would go from a positive to a negative and vice versa. And they knew that. And so when they would basically allowed them to look at ages ahead and predict where that society would go and where those things would happen. And they could even predict things like cataclysms that were going to be coming and figuring out when things were going to occur based on the alignment with the cosmos and the sun and basically the galactic plane of everything swinging through. They understood all of that, and they basically created time capsule libraries that reflected certain moments in time when things happened, when civilization arose. And those libraries were all moved underground into ancient libraries. And like I mentioned before, one of the newest theories that is being talked about is why this obsession with the ancient people over giant granite blocks made of silica, quartz. Most of granite is actually a high quartz silica content. And then if you compare something like the Earth, most beaches around the world the sand of a beach is mostly quartz silica. It's quartz, also known as silica, like in your watch, is what makes up the primary terrestrial body of this planet. It's a giant crystal. Okay. So in order to tap into that, they would essentially use the same phenomenon. And that way they could understand how to leave messages in quartz. I think that's where the newest science is going to go. When you look at all those ancient temples, we talk these megalithic temples that have no writing on them. And if they do, it was from a later culture that came and put graffiti on it, I call it. Those cultures had no writing because their writing may have been embedded in a non-third dimensional way encoded in those stones. And so one day in the future, when we realize how to tap into that energy and restore these ancient structures, that information may be there right in front of us all along. And that's why I talk about how the Sumerians with cuneiform etching into clay was literally the best form of 3D thinking you can have for leaving a message. But there are other ways to leave a message. And so we got to understand that many of these secrets that the ancients had may still be here today. We just don't understand how to read them, understand them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's fascinating to think about, especially considering, one wonders if we'll ever see it if we go down the technological path because you're not looking for it. And if you're not looking for the message, then you can't see it.
Exactly.
So it's going to be interesting to see how we discover, if we discover all those things. But guys, it's been great as always. Oh, yeah. You're going to have to come back when the book is finally done. If you guys, everybody who is listening to this, just check out the show notes. We've got all of their information there, plenty of books, plenty of content, YouTube channels, all this stuff. So I know you guys, you have some homework to go check out all the stuff that we talked about here. And so make sure to go check out both of their channels. And is there anything else you guys want to shout out? Anything coming up here for you guys?
Well, I have my Manifest Destiny 2022 workshop coming up January 8th and 9th. And then myself and Matt are going to do a special workshop, which we haven't picked the date yet, but we will. I'll give them a call later on tonight. We're going to do a special workshop sometime within the next few months or maybe the beginning of the year to go over ancient civilizations and a lot of the content most likely that'll be in the book.
Great. And yeah, I really look forward to doing all of that. I just want to also mention that, in my current job, I just want to say that things are going really, really well at Gaia. And all I'll say is there's some awesome content coming out that I've been working on with others. So I can't reveal anything else than that, but just check that out as you go forward. Because I'm trying to bring my passion to reach larger amounts of people, as well as the reason why I'm writing the book with Billy, because this message needs to be heard. So check out look for new notifications for updates we have on the book and any of the new content we're creating. But I also just want to mention that anyone's interested in my YouTube channel, it's Matthew LaCroix, and I am just about to release a campaign to save Eridu, the first site ever created in the world. It is I want this message to go around the world that that site is being ransacked right now, and there's no one protecting it, and there's cuneiform tablets being stolen, and it is the biggest priority, in my opinion, of any ancient site in the world at this moment. So please check out that video. I'll have that up at some point on my channel. And guys, it was an honor to speak to you. I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. It's going to be phenomenal.
Totally. All right, guys, make sure to check everything out. The link to that, to Eridu and stuff like that, we'll make sure to throw down if that is out when this comes out. But for the rest, guys, check out all that stuff, and we'll see you later.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.